Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I'm Julie Barrett, founder of Conservative Ladies of America, and we have a really awesome live stream for you this afternoon if you are watching from Washington, or this evening if you are on the East Coast, as I am, and my guest, Steven Welliever, is as well. So I'm really excited to introduce you to my guest tonight, as I have been following Steven on X for a number of years now, since before it was X, when it was Twitter. He is a wealth of information when it comes to critical race theory, ethnic studies, DEI policies, and really tracing it back to, Marxism and Stalinism, and really explaining how these policies harm our students. And so when Washington's Senate Bill 5189, which seeks to implement more competency-based learning into the K-12 education system, I reached out to Steven on X and said, hey, would you be willing to do a live stream with me so that we can tell people what this is all about and why it's so bad? And he agreed. And so without further ado, I will welcome Steven to the live stream. Steven, thank you so much for being here. Steven's had a long day at work, so we are grateful for your time this evening. You are a former K-12 educator from Washington.
Yep, I was a math and science teacher in public schools in the South Sound area. I was also the head of an independent school in the state capital.
So you were right in the thick of it there in Olympia.
Oh yeah, right at ground zero.
Yes, well, you are a wealth of information. I'm actually going to put your X handle on the screen so people can go over and follow you on X. Whenever one of these policies comes up in Washington or anywhere else, as you and I are both out of Washington now, you're in West Virginia, I'm in Florida, but you and I are both still really in the thick of Washington stuff and really follow that closely. And so whenever one of these policies comes up, you're the first. I always go to your X account and I search for whatever the policy is, or I just DM you and ask for your 2 cents on the matter. So this bill, Senate Bill 5189, this is not the first time this has come up in Washington. It is going to pass this session, and it passed the Senate last week, I think, with all but 2 Republican senators voting yes. Before we even get into like the details of the policy, why do you think it is that Republicans are voting yes on this kind of, because it is a big DEI Trojan horse, right?
There's been, yes, it is a big communist Trojan horse. There's been a lot of momentum behind it, building behind it over the last couple of years. This isn't just a bill that's coming out of nowhere. The State Board of Education has been discussing it for years. They've put together a state mastery-based learning cooperative of schools to test this out in. And they're I think they're finishing up their second or third year now of doing this at some scale. So there's model schools to look at what they're doing. They've been quite open about posting blogs and all kinds of reports about their progress in implementing this at the schools that are testing it out.
So one of the things that I have a hard time with on competency-based learning, because it sounds nice, right? Like we want our kids to be competent. Of course we do. And so you kind of have to get down into the weeds to explain to people why this is bad, which is, we're going to go in the weeds tonight. As you mentioned, this is something they've been working on for a long time. The State Board of Education has had several work sessions. They've implemented policies on it. The education committees in the legislature have had work sessions and presentations. Where is the best place to start to get down in the weeds and explain this to people?
should we start with just kind of framing the situation as to why is this method coming about? Why is it needed right now?
Yes.
I think might be the best way to start out framing our discussion.
Perfect.
And I'm going to do that not by describing what's going on in our schools, but what was going on in Soviet schools at this exact moment. After years of DEI were used to hire teachers based not only on their allegiance to the Communist Party and its teachings, but also by race to make sure that teachers were matching the demographics of their students. And this was done so that students would believe that communism wasn't something that was being imposed on them from the outside, that it was their own innate concept and desire to be communist. What happened is you were hiring a bunch of incompetent teachers, and the grades the achievement levels started plummeting, especially in areas that were already highly literate. The achievement rate in one area in the Volga region of the Soviet Union dropped from 80% down into the 30s after just this short period of DEI took place. And so we're seeing some kind of similar numbers in the 30s with reading mastery levels in our schools in Washington. I'm going to read a little bit from a couple of authors, one from Inkles and Bauer, were Harvard professors writing in the 50s, and another one called Timofeyev, a Russian professor who's writing in 1946. The period from 1918 to 1931 was of high enthusiasm for progressive education. In the midst of the first 5-year plan, the leaders of the Soviet Union became acutely aware that the products of their lower and middle schools were adequately prepared neither for study in institutions of advanced learning nor for work in the industrial system that was being rapidly developed. They were deficient in the basic skills of reading, writing, and computation, and they lacked discipline. Generally low level of competence in teachers and the disruption of family life, which lessened the parents' influence over the child. The regime, however, placed the responsibility almost exclusively on the philosophy and methods of progressive education. Another author goes on to say, but the methods of teaching and training in the style of the communist experiment once more made the efforts of both teachers and students nothing but a waste of time. There were hundreds of thousands of students in institutions of higher learning, but they hardly knew the 3 R's. There were millions of children in elementary and secondary schools, but actually they acquired mastery in one art only, that of discussing, in stereotyped terms, political and social problems.
Wow.
And so then they had to create a solution to this problem of innumeracy and illiteracy. And they came up with, and it's going to start sounding familiar to mastery-based learning, a series of ladders or steps is designed to carry the successful students more or less continuously from the early grades through college. At some points, the student may step off, either permanently or onto a parallel ladder. The parallel ladder, however, may not go far, and although theoretically the student can step back again into the main ladder, the crossing back is not easy and not many make it. What mastery-based learning is this system of parallel ladders that are being made available to students because the kids can't pass, especially in high school, they can't pass the required number of courses to graduate. They can't pass that many. They've been dumbing down the math, they've been dumbing down all the courses, but they still can't pass them. So they need to come up with a parallel system that can get them across that finish line. And I don't know if you have that graphic of OSPI's logo handy.
Yep.
We can try and bring that up.
It's up. I'm going to. Are you able to see it?
I can't see it, but I know what.
Okay. It is on the screen. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you can see OSPI's logo side by side there with a Soviet propaganda education poster. And they're literally the same thing. You can see in OSPI, the overall shape of that is of the wheel. In communist symbolism, that represents Soviet power. So the circle shape represents communist power. The lie of the communist sun, you see it in the background there, in the field propaganda poster. That's also in the same exact position in the OSPI logo. You see that sun back there. And what OSPI has proposed with this mastery-based learning, or these parallel, in the Soviet system, it was called parallel ladders to carry kids through to graduation. That's what's represented by OSPI with the fields coming off to the sides there. That's supposed to represent equity in graduation pathways. That's what OSPI has said anyway. And so you see those the same fields in the same shape coming off on the logo there. So you got the lie of the communist sun, you got the wheel shape, you have the equitable fields coming off, and I'm trying to think what other the important elements are there. I think that's about it. The Soviet poster, of course, says, my field is my school. And so it's this shift away from seat time and classroom learning to, oh, you can get credits doing anything under the sun, including driving a tractor.
Wow. I think you just blew a lot of minds just now with this, because I'm just looking at the chat and people are like, oh my goodness. Do you know when OSPI did this version of their logo?
It's been around for it was right around the whole Black Lives Matter 2020, when all those things were coming in all at once.
Do you think that, I know a lot of us have kind of theories about how COVID was used to really usher in or accelerate the ushering in of a lot of these policies. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, exactly. It correlates with the 10th Party Congress and the hunger death, which was used to usher in these policies in the Soviet Union.
Wow. All right. I can remove this from the screen. Did you want?
Yeah, go ahead and take that down.
Okay. All right.
That anymore. I'm just sort of framing it. So this period of time when they started this sort of mastery-based learning, what would be an equivalent to that, as we are here in our schools now. This was done under a slogan called "Education for All." And during this period of time, it was no longer about equal access to education. It was about equal outcomes in education. So it was truly no longer about, okay, we're giving everybody access to a high quality education. It's that you're all going to come out the same. It was during this time period that they actually got rid of special ed and gifted ed, because the socialist system couldn't be producing humans that were achieving at different levels innately, and so that slogan, education for all, you'll see that it's key in Senate Bill 5189. They don't say education for all, but that for all statement is very prominent. Let me see if I can find it here. Strategies to ensure equity for all students. It's that for all Stalinist Komsomol slogan that they hit over and over again in these policies.
And one of the things that I quoted you on, that you had tweeted it, and I grabbed it and quoted it because it was such a great, it really pulls the whole idea of equity, is that pulls every student down to the lowest common denominator. So, and you see that, right? In Washington, they're getting rid of a lot of the gifted programs.
Yeah. And not only are they getting rid of gifted programs, but just like the Soviets did, they're using student activists to lobby to get rid of the gifted programs. And I spent most of my career in high cap education, so that's you're picking a fight with me on that one. It's I can't believe we're getting rid of courses like that. I mean, I was told that I was basically what's the word for it? There was no need for me as a teacher anymore because we didn't have students who were capable of taking the courses that I taught. So I was basically told I was obsolete, and
Wow.
to go get a career technical education certificate because that's where they were shoving all the science students into getting their credits through career technical education.
Wow. And how long ago was that?
Oh, that was at the beginning of the woke era, mid-teens.
Okay. That's what I was going to say, about 10 years ago. Now, as you were talking about the ladders and the whole mastery based system, I have a question for you, because one of the things that we've been seeing specifically in Washington, I imagine it's happening in other states as well, but you have more, and they're often bipartisan, these policies to, like, for instance, financial literacy or media literacy, and they want to make them graduation requirements, and they are mandated, right? So how does that sort of thing play into this, and is that all part of that system?
I don't know about financial literacy and some of those other things. Literacy has a dual meaning to communists. It means party literacy, socialist literacy, in addition to regular literacy. And I would assume that anything that has the word literacy baked into it also has that same understanding that it's going to require socialist consciousness literacy as part of it.
That's kind of what I figured. And I didn't mean to get you off track. I was just, when you were talking, that occurred to me.
If kids had basic mathematical skills, this financial literacy thing wouldn't even be a question.
Right. Well, when we went to school, we didn't have a separate, like, it was all just baked into our math.
Yeah, compounding interest and that kind of thing would
Right.
give an example, things about financial literacy.
Right.
And, we would have learned it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Where do you want to go next?
Okay. How about, well, I would like to take a look at some of the things that are written here in 5189.
Okay. While you're looking through your notes, I'm going to see if I can pull up that bill on the screen for folks to take a look at. If you found your notes, go ahead and.
Okay. One of the things that pops up, I think it's unnumbered. It's right at the first page, but it talks about assessments. And assessment being meaningful, positive, empowering, yields timely, relevant, and actionable evidence. If there's something on here that says it needs to be measurable, it's at the end. Expectations that are measurable. And so that part of the whole mastery-based learning kind of suite of concepts involves getting rid of the grading system. It means getting rid of the A through F scale, getting rid of grading on a 100% scale. And the teachers that are implementing this part of the mastery-based learning cooperative have blogged about this pretty extensively. This is a revolution in getting rid of our grading system as we know it. And
wow.
So when they say measurable, that's real vague. I can read from, this is from Tumwater. Tumwater has learned that it takes multiple and ongoing efforts to shift grading practices. And it all starts with a change of mindset, Hardcastle. explained, there are some grading practices that have stood the test of time and are not educationally sound. These practices simply do not accurately reflect with confidence what a student knows and is able to do. Challenging grading practices often creates a rather visceral reaction in a defensive position. It's important to use these opportunities to shift mindsets. Tumwater found that implementing a new district-wide grading policy aligned with mastery-based learning tenets wasn't enough. Teachers need to understand that pedagogical philosophy underlying the traditional 100-point and A through F grading practices and why it's problematic. Similarly, they need to understand the pedagogical philosophy underlying standards-based grading to be able to use it effectively as an instructional tool to help students learn. So they're not hiding it. They're trying to get rid of the grading system that we have. And part of that is to produce actual equal Soviet-style outcomes where everybody has, like we're in the 1930s Soviet Union, has the same grade coming out of the class. And you have to destroy our system to do that. And it gets worse because that wasn't where they stopped complaining about the A through F and 100-point grading system. They actually had the nerve. This is from a teacher in Washington who's doing this mastery-based learning, critiquing the 100-point grading system. Let's see. This is contrary to proper giving students 50 points. Rather, it is awarding a punishment that fits the crime. They're saying they should get 50 points instead of a 0 out of 100. The student failed to turn in an assignment, so they received a failing grade. They are not sent to a Siberian labor camp. There is, of course, an important difference. Sentences at Siberian labor camps ultimately come to an end, while grades of 0 on a 100-point scale last forever. This teacher has the nerve to compare getting a bad grade on a 100-point scale to a gulag sentence.
Right,
and
right.
That, I have a book of firsthand accounts of Siberian gulags right here. If Bolshevik Bill Kalapa or anyone at Washington State Board of Education wants to hear what a Northern labor camp is really like, I don't think I could actually read more than a few sentences without losing it. I mean, just crying and not being able to finish reading the words.
So you have a teacher in Washington State who's comparing a student who chose not to turn in their assignment with being in a gulag.
Where students, the age of 17, in this example I have right here, no clothing, tattered clothing, no shoes. They're in the snow. They're working day and night for very little food. They're swollen from hunger. Their hands and feet are frozen off. The girls are being thrown, and these are teenage girls, being thrown on a pile, not yet dead, because they can't work anymore. And they're comparing that to getting a bad grade for an assignment you didn't turn in.
Right.
And posting this for all to read.
If they're treating students like this, coddling them like this, and I don't know, I mean, that's probably part of the whole falls in with the restorative justice stuff, which is, more communist crap. Like, we can't even get these kids to, this whole generation doesn't want to do anything. They don't think they should have to do anything. I mean, and if this is the kind of educator that we've got in the system, of course they don't. They don't think they have to.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It's pretty unbelievable. And like I said, that part of this system was created in the Soviet Union because the civilization was about to collapse because they didn't have kids with the competence in the workplace to do basic reading, writing, or work ethic or anything.
Right.
And we're at a similar phase. I know what it's like on job sites. We kind of have a rule: no one under 50 gets to order concrete, because it's in 3 dimensions and they haven't figured that out yet. Right. But yeah, just the work ethic that you see coming in, and the basic skills that the young people have. We're at a we're in a bad place that we need to get it turned around.
And this is why I tell people, even if you don't have students in school, you don't have grandkids in school, or you haven't had kids yet, this is something that we all need to be concerned about, because if we have several generations of Americans who are uneducated, we are in for a world of hurt. I mean, we already are in for a world of hurt. I mean, as if COVID wasn't enough, we've got them dumbing down the American students.
Yep.
Not even dumbing down, indoctrinating.
I'm an exiled father of 2 teenage boys. Have the paperwork right here. Steven talks extensively about communism in schools. It was the reason a permanent protection order was put on me till my children are 18.
Wow. From Washington State?
Washington State.
You know, it's and this is a whole other live stream, but there are a few parents of Washington parents that's the family court. And I've been through a bunch of family court stuff in Washington. We could have a whole separate live stream for that.
We don't want to get sidetracked on that.
But that is like, people need to know that. And a lot of parents who are staying in Washington, maybe because their kids are in Washington, so they're staying in Washington. They're like a trans father of a trans kid was going along with it. And I'm just thinking, this father was probably going, and he's a conservative. So I'm thinking this father was probably going along with it because he knew if he didn't, the Washington family court would not let him see his kid. So he had to, go along with his son is a girl. So
yeah. The family courts are as big of a concern as the schools are.
For sure.
What's going on. Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
But we were talking about indoctrinating kids, and I think we should probably spend a little bit of time focusing on how mastery-based learning carries that out.
Yep.
I don't know if you have the graphic of the last report of the Mastery-Based Learning Cooperative from the Aurora.
Yep. I have it up.
Just so people can see what the cover of it looks like.
Yep, I've got it up.
Talking. That report from last year, I did a search. You just did a little search word in there for CRSE, which stands for Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education. It basically goes along with anti-racism and critical race theory and all those kind of race Marxist concepts. It's basically how you take a child's culture and transform it into a socialist version of that culture through the education process. This was done to 192 ethnic groups in the Soviet Union in the late 20s and early 30s. And that's what they mean by culturally responsive sustaining education. It's a communist indoctrination process. This report had CRSE, the acronym, not the spelled out culturally responsive sustaining education, 199 times in the report about mastery-based learning. So if you want to know what mastery-based learning is really focused on, whatever you thought it was, that's what it really is. 199 times in that report.
And I want to, so Steven's on his phone, so he can't see the image that is on the screens. But he sent it to me, so he knows the image. But I'm just gonna read to you for those of you that are watching. Just want to point out a couple things. So do you see in the palm of the one hand, it says unity, and then also written in the circle, it says, we gun be all right. All my life I has to fight. So just right there, if you're looking at those, and they've got it really, so it's not prominent, but you kind of have to look at the words. So they're trying to hide it a little bit, but not entirely. But the point is that I'm trying to make is you can see, if you just read those words that are in the graphic there, you get a very different idea about what this mastery-based learning is all about, rather than, actually grasping concepts. It's definitely about this ideology and this culturally responsive, sustaining education.
It's quite a cover graphic.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if you really start like looking at all the details, you start seeing all the different innuendos that those subliminal messaging and all the things that they're trying to do with that.
Yeah.
Can I pull up the core tenets?
Yes, please.
This report that Steven's referring to is from the Aurora Institute, and you guys can Google that. It's available on their website if you want to read through it. I think you can download the PDF. Here is their core tenets. We believe in and advocate for anti-racist, inclusive, and equitable practices, policies, and cultures that create conditions for everyone to have a strong sense of belonging, proficiency-based learning and teaching, multiple and flexible pathways that promote deep learning, as well as student voice and choice. I'm guessing those pathways are, if they're not able to meet the academic standards, then there are other pathways for them to get their way through school. Shared data-informed decision-making amongst educators, student families, and community members, trusting relationships between students, families, and educators, professional learning groups for educators. So do you want to elaborate on any of those?
Those policies, the anti-racism, those are, again, these are Soviet policies. And when I can't believe people don't have the same reaction that I do. And I guess it's been 100 years since these policies were first implemented, meaning nobody that experienced them is alive.
Right.
And so when you hear those terms, when you hear anti-racism or in Lenin's words, inequality of the oppressor, it was a whole system of policies that were in the schools. I really can't believe this has happened, and it's gone on this deep. Even the BIPOC, when they started recycling that, I couldn't believe they brought the same. I mean, they stole that from, it was backwards and indigenous peoples of communism. They stole it and brought it to the United States and recycled BIPOC.
I did not know that.
It was in Russian, so it wasn't the same letters, but.
Can you say that again, what it stood for? I know you said it's different letters.
Yeah, backwards and indigenous, instead of black and indigenous peoples, it's backwards and indigenous peoples. But the backwardsness was due to colonial slavery. So they just put black in for backwards, and indigenous remained the same.
Right.
Yeah, they were
communism.
And that was the division. You were either backwards and indigenous, or you were Russian. And same way they put BIPOC and white. They did the same, divide the population in two, with the majority minority maneuvers with the BIPOC acronym. I couldn't believe they pulled that one straight out of the Soviet Union too, and nobody noticed it.
Wow. You just blew my mind. You're blowing my mind. And not in a good way.
And it was a hierarchy too. The B's got more than the I's. They're always demanding more due to the conditions of colonial slavery. They needed more resources, more equitable treatment.
So I want to go back to Senate Bill 5189, because this bill has a hearing in the House Education Committee tomorrow, and I'm really hopeful that we can share this video with some of the Republicans on the Education Committee, just so that they have a better understanding of what this is. But I want, this bill is going to pass. It is. I mean, it's a priority for the Democrats. It's a priority for the State Board of Education. What more do parents that have kids in school people that are hiring, students out of high school or whatever. What do citizens need to know about this policy, and how would you direct them to oppose it? Like, how would they speak to it to oppose it? Because it's not one of those easy things like, I don't like this bill because it gives the governor, unprecedented power and control. This bill is not quite so black and white. So can you kind of help a little bit with that?
I would say the whole function of it, of destroying the grading system that we've used for forever, is one concern about it. I don't know if you have that example from the Tumwater district.
Yep.
Where the boys, this is supposed to be an engineering class for 8th grade. I think it was 8th graders. And they have a design challenge that they have to create a more equitable classroom. And okay, when you think of the word engineer now, let's look at this engineering design challenge that we got going on here. Do you have a picture of the?
I have it up. Mm-hmm.
You have it up. Okay, so there's this boy here, and it says that he has he's measured the classroom. And
Maybe I don't have the right one, because
Oh.
it says culturally responsive MBL implementation steps, next steps, and then ongoing actions.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's not the right one.
Is it on your X? Because I can try.
I've tweeted about it before. I'm trying to think what I know. If you search MBL, you'll probably find it in there somewhere. It's a boy with a tablet, a red tablet.
Let's see if I can. Hopefully, I'm not gonna. I am not able to get on X at the moment, so
I can describe it. It's just well, you can see the tasks that they're doing, and they're just so dumb. Okay, you had a kid pull a tape on a classroom. It's a rectangle, okay? So he pulled the tape one direction, he pulled the tape another direction. This is an 8th grade boy, okay? He should be pre-algebra, maybe even algebra, What kind of pre-algebra skill is it to pull a tape on a rectangle and then draw it to scale on your paper? That's not sophisticated. That's not what I would expect from an 8th grade level. And the photograph that they used of the boy, he's typing in. He's not doing the calculations himself like a good engineer should be able to do off the top of his head. You call yourself an engineer and you got to type in 26 times 5 into your that was the number he was actually typing in, was 26 times 5. Like, you can't do that either on paper by yourself or do it in your head mentally.
Right.
You have to ask your gadget for that answer of 26 times 5. And then he was, in the photo, he's just like picking furniture, standard square desks out of it. I mean, what innovative solution did this kid actually find to putting desks for that many kids in a rectangle of that square footage? I bet it looks like every other classroom you've ever seen in your life. There was no genius equitable solution to this.
Right.
And that was what he was being given engineering credits for, which probably involves some mathematics and I don't know what other credits he was being awarded.
And I remember, now that you're like explaining the image, I remember it. I remember seeing you explain it the first time.
So this is real dumbed down. I mean, they're erasing any accountability for our traditional grading system and then awarding some kind of credit for the dumbest of dumbed down learning.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah. And, you have kids that are graduating from high school that can't, like even a senior in high school that can't do that 26 times 5 or whatever the number was that you said. They can't do that without a calculator. I mean, even like, basic things like 5 times 9. You've got like seniors in high school that are And it's astounding to me because, I mean, when we were, in grade school, it was the flashcards and you had to be able to do that by memory. So it's very scary, and wanting to do away with the grading system. I mean, I think people should be, I tell people not, do everything in your power to get your kids out of public schools in Washington state. It is not safe to send your kids to school in Washington. But yeah, so the grading system is one of the things that people should speak
Right.
to, and the doing away with the grading system.
So, and along those lines of equal outcomes, a lot of people don't know that there's some higher level policies already published by the Washington State School Directors Association on mastery-based learning. And I like to read that one just so people
Yeah.
can hear that not only about, getting rid of grading for equal outcomes, but this policy says to ensure cultural responsiveness and equity in awarding mastery-based credit, the district will collect and annually review disaggregated data to see which subgroups of students are receiving mastery-based credit. If disproportionality is found, the district will take appropriate actions to ensure equitable access to these crediting opportunities. So this is based on every subgroup having equal outcomes with regard to these mastery-based learning credits also. And it's not going to, of course, you're going to find some discrepancies.
Of course.
And I don't think people understand how many subgroups Washington monitors. It tracks, and this is required. You're required to write this down when you register your child in Washington State. If not, the school will do it for you. There are over 80 categories of Black students alone.
Wow.
So when you're talking about disaggregated data, they're going to sift through and find every lingual minority of whatever kind from wherever and look for disproportionality to keep hammering everything down. And this is already a model Washington State School Directors Association model policy. So the school boards have this. I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but it's probably in your district filed somewhere.
So what that means, so people understand, when WASDA has a model policy, they push that down to the school, the local school board, and then the local school boards are supposed to implement that. Is that how that works?
Right. And sometimes it's required by law that they adopt it. I forget about this particular one. But for example, the gender inclusive schools policy was required. Once WASDA came up with the model, the schools were forced to implement it.
Now, Washington State is very, you've got some school districts that are in very remote, very rural areas. And then of course you have your, urban areas. You've got Seattle School District and those, more in Western Washington. So it seems like this is going to be quite a challenge for them to be able to push this out in an equitable way. No?
They do. I mean, a part of their mastery-based learning cooperative, they do have a pretty wide variety of schools participating in implementing it. Some of them are, smaller rural schools. So
what is the, I looked at the fiscal note on this bill, and it was a little bit hard to decipher exactly how much this is going to cost the state versus how much it's going to cost the local school district. Do you have any idea on the cost of implementing something like this?
I don't, because so much of it is vague. And when the legislature was discussing this a couple years ago, they gave the example of a tribal canoe journey being something that you would get mastery-based learning credits for. Okay, that doesn't really, that might not require school personnel at all. It might require, unless there's a tribal school that's engaged in the activity, but it may be something outside of school, for some of these things. For some of these things, you're talking about work, getting credits for work related activities. that might be a side job in past years, but now you're getting X amount of credits for doing this side job that you have in the afternoons. So because some of it can potentially be taking place outside of the school, I don't know how much funding is getting awarded for supervision of and awarding of those credits or not.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vagueness built into it.
Yeah. So, do you want to talk about, so the graphic that I have, which I pulled from one of your tweets a while ago, is from Tumwater School District, but it goes through, let's see, it goes through the MBL, it goes through the implementation steps, the next steps, and the ongoing actions. And I can kind of read through them, and then you can elaborate where you want to.
Okay.
But the implementation is they engage the school community in creating these conditions for success. The conditions are: build shared commitment to just, rigorous, equitable, responsive, and welcoming learning environments. Develop understanding of youth-centered, culturally responsive, sustaining, mastery-based approaches. Explore issues of power and identity. Foster ongoing collaboration. Then they're going to craft learning outcomes aligned with state standards and schools' vision, and then define success criteria for learning outcomes. So those are the implementation steps. Anything you want to speak to on that?
The Leninist Youth League is ready to go. All right. I don't know how you would describe the Leninist Youth League in more specific terms, but that's pretty bad. That didn't clarify anything about what mastery-based learning is other than communism.
Right.
It really didn't. It didn't help nail it down at all. Those are all a very explicitly Leninist youth program.
Yeah. And that people should know that even without this mastery-based learning as part of the ethnic studies that is required in Washington State, they often, I think at most grade levels, they are showing your kids the wheel of power and oppression, where everybody falls somewhere on the wheel. You're either a victim or an oppressor. And it's just like asking kids to identify themselves on this wheel. And so it sounds like this is kind of taking that and going like another step further, immersing these kids in it.
Yeah. And if that's the ideology going in, and some of these are supposed to be, in workplace settings, I just pushing discriminatory practices into the workplace via the schools through this program. It just sounds horrible.
Yeah. I would not want to be a business owner in Washington trying to hire a Washington public schools graduate.
Or even hire one who's getting dual credits for their labor on the job. Like, I mean, because that's what some of this mastery is supposed to be, job related credits.
Right.
So, and with all those school policies following along with,
Yeah. Let's go through the next steps real quick here. Kind of more word salad, communist garbage. Design or revise culturally responsive sustaining units. Create opportunities for practice, feedback, revision. Design reteaching, reassessment, and support systems. Center accuracy and equity in grading systems. Design multiple pathways to graduation. Foster responsive, youth-centered school culture. So there's your grading issue again.
Yeah, and the system of parallel ladders that, the multiple pathways to graduation, and the equitable grading comes back in there.
And then ongoing action, engage in cycles of student and community feedback, use student work to calibrate judgments and adjust instruction, engage in continuous learning, and create handbook for new staff. One of the things I think is interesting about these programs is all of the student led instead of educators. You know, it's not coming down from the educators. They're wanting the students to drive this.
That's a good point. A few years back, Washington got rid of the requirement that teachers achieve a minimum passing score on the WESB, the Washington Educator Skills Test Basic. This is a real basic test. I mean, like measuring a triangle, or, you know, not even sixth grade level math, I would say. And the English language arts part of it isn't really, it's not more difficult than middle school, like a seventh grade level maybe. The teachers still have to take it. They just don't have to pass it. So the state has the data. It's just not sharing it or requiring them to get a minimal score on it. And it is atrocious.
Wow.
For some minority groups, I mean, of teachers, we're talking 50% can pass the math and only a third can pass the English. When OSPI declared that it was an inequitable barrier to the teaching profession, they actually did a little blog and posted that one of their teachers failed the English section 8 times, and why it shouldn't be required to be a teacher, because that was keeping her out of the profession. And
Wow.
so we don't have the teachers in Washington State to teach even upper elementary school level academic skills anymore. There are some that are passing, sure, but like I said, that was for the Black demographic that I just gave you. For some of the other demographics, I think on average it's like 2/3 of them can pass. It's pretty bad.
Wow.
We have a lot of uneducated teachers in the classroom, and
Yeah.
so I see this shifting the responsibility for learning down to not coming from the teacher, coming from the student, is probably factors into that, having low educational quality of teachers.
Yeah, and there, you know, I am my mom is a retired public school teacher. And you know, when I share with her some of the things that are going on in education now, she can't believe it. I mean, it's changed so much since even she retired. And I think that one of the things is that we're seeing at the college level is the teachers are being indoctrinated so that they can go into these schools and indoctrinate the students.
Yeah. And now with 5044, with the DEI CCDEI requirement for teacher certification, and that goes to the principals, and it goes to the newly elected school board members too. They all have to get that same indoctrination, so everybody's on board with it, rather than focusing on what schools used to be about.
And while you're on that, so Steve's referring to Senate Bill 5044, which passed in 20 or 21, was a few years ago, with bipartisan support. Always love that when things pass with bipartisan support. Yesterday or the day before, Senate Bill 5179 passed out of the Senate, and that is basically a snitch line for people to call OSPI if their local school board isn't following state mandates. So they're pushing in these garbage policies, and you have pockets, you know, the red pockets of Washington that are pushing back and standing up against it. And now they're going to implement this policy, this snitch line, to penalize school boards that are not following state mandates.
Is that the one that pulls 20% of the funding?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So it's interesting because you've got the OSPI that's not going to go along with Trump's mandates, and says you can't pull our funding. But when someone does it to Reichdahl with these local school boards, it doesn't work the same. So it's interesting to see the hypocrisy.
And the state penalties higher because
Yes.
federal funds aren't that. I think in Washington, the biggest number I saw was 13.7 or something like that. So yeah, the state penalty would be much higher.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on 8 o'clock here for you and I. Are there any closing thoughts that you have? There's a lively chat going on. And we've got Joy and Jeannie and Mary from our leadership team are all in the chat, kind of answering some questions. But are there any, please, everyone, go follow Steve on X, because he's just a wealth of information, and you're really great about answering people's questions. I've noticed when they respond to you on your posts. Oh, and Leslie's in the chat too. What else what else do people need to know before we sign off tonight?
I mean, basically, it's a Soviet solution to a Soviet problem. It's a Band-Aid they're trying to fix to the crisis that we're going to have in graduation because nobody can pass the classes, and they're doing it by keeping down the same path that led to this problem. Isn't going to fix anything. It's credit washing. And yeah. I think Tonians need credit washing.
So, and this is probably a much longer conversation, but is there a way, can this be fixed? You've got, let's say you're a parent of a student that's 7th grade, got several years left to go. What do? Do they just pull them, or?
Yeah, things crossed the line a long time for me.
Yep.
A long time ago. And that's why I do manual labor now instead of am in the teaching profession, but I still put all my effort into fighting it because of how strongly I feel about it.
And that's what we have to do. My kids are all now 18 and over. We got them out of Washington Public Schools a couple of years ago. But it makes such a good point for, even if you don't have kids in school, our country depends on these generations. And so it's incumbent upon us to fix this problem and to fight against this, because it will ruin our country. And I see Trump as kind of like this stopgap. But 4 years from now could bring us, another radical left Democrat. Your local school district, your state level, that's really where you need to be fighting.
And I'll add one more thing. If this bill and this whole concept of mastery-based learning was really trying to get at what it purports to be, of kids demonstrating that they know stuff and getting credits that way, this bill would look a whole lot different. It would have it would be stripped of all this communist language. It would just be a different bill. In substance, and it's not. So I wouldn't trust it.
Yeah. And before we go, Jeannie sent me the picture. So I put the picture on the screen. Everybody can see it now, of that you were describing, of the kid doing the engineering lesson. So yeah, it's pretty basic of showing a classroom of desks. So it really didn't take a whole lot of creativity or thinking for this kid to do what he did. So, but there you go, everybody. And I think some people are asking, I've seen in the chat, for screenshots and stuff. So I will put out a Substack tomorrow. So make sure that you are subscribed to our Substack. I'll put that on the screen here. But I will put in the Substack, I'll put all of these graphics that we've had up tonight, and I'll put a link to Steve on X, so you can make sure that you go over there and follow him. And then if you have any questions for either of us about Senate Bill 5189 and how you can oppose it and fight back, we are both happy to answer any questions.
All right.
I spoke for you there, Steve. I don't know if you're happy to answer. What's that?
Conservative ladies of Washington is how I stay on top of the education stuff in Washington now that I've moved. So I appreciate the efforts.
Well, thank you, and thanks for being our go-to guy on all things education. You're awesome, and we appreciate you so much. Thanks so much for taking the time tonight to do this with us. Please, everybody, go follow Steve on X at Steve Welliever, and be sure you're subscribed to the Substack so you'll get all this tomorrow in your inbox. And we'll see you guys next time. Have a good night, everybody.